Hello and welcome to the first edition of the VendLab eCommerce podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Folwell, who is the founder of Muddy Trowel. Steve is going to tell us all about his business and his inspiration and the inspiration behind it. So over to you, Steve. Can you tell us a bit about Muddy Trowel and what made you think about starting this business?
Of course, Trevor. I'm very honoured to be the first guest on this august, which I know is going to be a hit.
You are too kind.
Hit podcast, well, probably, but we'll see, shall we? I'm very excited. Thank you very much for talking to me about Muddy Trowel. Where did it come from? Well, it emerged from the first lockdown, April last year. I was twiddling my thumbs, metaphorically, having left a previous startup, Lovespace, as chief exec, and moved to the board there. And I was thinking about what I was going to do next. COVID struck. Long story short, I decided to launch a business to help nurseries and garden centres get plants that would otherwise have gone to waste into the hands of gardeners during the first lockdown, and called up a few mates and set up Muddy Trowel in 2 weeks. And which was a great lockdown business, but we always had an intention to create something longer lasting, and so we've morphed that into a provider of joyful, sustainable plant kits for amateur and aspiring gardeners, people who love plants but maybe don't want to get their hands too dirty into gardening. And that's what we've been running for the last 6 months.
Like an all-in-one kit.
It is an all-in-one kit. Think sort of Gusto or HelloFresh for gardening. Yeah, exactly, the plant world. So we provide you with everything you need to create a beautiful display of plants. At the moment, mainly in containers, but we're moving on to kind of borders and larger formats. So imagine you've got a patio, a balcony, sort of window boxes. We'll deliver you the container, we'll deliver you the compost you need, and a beautifully curated selection of in bloom plants, so you get an instant impact immediately. The big difference from those kind of things that you might otherwise be buying from garden centres or DIY stores or the bigger supermarkets is that the plants that we source are the UK based. They're largely perennials. They'll last year after year.
Okay.
So not only you get an amazing instant hit of colour and impact, but also you've got plants that incredibly good value because they'll look easy to last, and you can learn how to nurture and look after them over time.
Okay, so where's if you went to a local garden centre, they delivered you something that would normally be something which would be perhaps not last as long, or
yeah, so you've got sort of two ends of the spectrum. At one end, garden centres cater for people who know a little bit about gardening, or at least if you don't know a little about gardening, you're in real danger of killing the stuff that you buy from there and putting it in the wrong place. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the convenience, even cut flowers or those sort of baskets of annuals, which are pretty environmentally unfriendly and don't last very long.
A lot of them come from
we all know the smell. That smell you get from a vase of flowers after they've gone. You just want to keep them nurture them on a little bit longer. But that's we're not about kind of short-termers, and we want plants that are going to last for people and continue to bloom.
So what kind of customers do you have? Are they so a lot of them would be people who are kind of perhaps bought a new house or something like that and are looking to dip their toe into the gardening world?
Yeah, there's definitely sort of the first timers, people who kind of want to do up. Everyone really wants to do up their outdoor space. There's a big trend, obviously, particularly accelerated by COVID. People being around the house more, thinking about design of the space that haven't spent a lot of time in. And this, one of the biggest growth sectors last year has been outdoor furniture, stuff for patios. So we're tapping into that, certainly. Lots of folk who would like to jolly up their outdoor space. People who want to get into gardening for the first time, don't know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And big segment for us is gifters. So we just had Mother's Day, and so in the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks, probably about 75-80% of our sales have been actually gifts, because of what you get with us.
It's interesting, they being Mother's Day, because I've got a friend of mine that runs a flower business, and his business looks something like this: Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, I mean, he'll do like a month's sales in a day.
Yeah.
Do you find that, has it been that peaky for you?
Well, it's almost the other, for us, those fill the gaps that outdoor plants would normally, be quiet in. So if you think about the outdoor plant season, it really runs March through to sort of July. And so Christmas, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day fill a gap for us.
Yeah.
So we my previous business, Love Space, was also a very seasonal business, probably much more seasonal than plants, because we stored a lot for international students, continue to store a lot for international students. And so, I'm used to running those kind of businesses. And one of the tricks of running a seasonal business is that you both set up operationally to be able to respond to all those peaks. Yeah, but also you look to fill the gaps where you can, so that you can spread your fixed costs.
Is it just outdoor plants you do, or do indoor plants?
Just outdoor at the moment, yeah. So obviously, one way of solving the kind of seasonality would be doing more indoor plants. The problem with indoor plants is they're very well served. Some very good startups, Patch Plants, Beards and Daisies, and others. Lots of copycats to Patch, and actually, that it's not a particularly, although they all look very green, it's not particularly environmentally friendly kind of space. Doesn't fit that well with our brand. Most of those plants are shipped. Most of those plants are shipped in straight off the kind of boat or plane from Holland, and they have to be kept, in very warm conditions all year round, obviously, including in the nursery. So, it doesn't quite fit our brand ethos yet. We're also about collections of plants rather than individual plants. You can pretty much buy the same plant at each of those kind of retailers. So we've not done indoor yet. We may move into it if we can do it in the right way next year.
Okay, sounds good. So tell me about, because I'm interested in, obviously my experiences with selling mainly a lot of things like toys and other baby products that just never go off, right? So I'm interested to know, how do you actually deal with the supply chain of your products? Obviously, I'm guessing that optimizing the supply chain so you don't, things don't die is very, very important. So how do you go about doing that?
So, I mean, first thing to say is we're learning all the time. So we've been going about 9 months, and that problem is partly the reason that I believe in our business, because I think that problem makes it difficult for other people to come in and copy. So the way we do it is it's almost like a judo throw, really. We only want things that are in season and looking good for a period of time, right? So we want to buy things pretty much close to the point that we can then sell them on, and we don't want to be holding too much inventory. But we need to send out quality plants, and what we don't want to do is just get a nursery from Leeds, for instance, to send the plants out to customers without us being able to check the quality. So we're taking in about 2-3 weeks of inventory from nurseries, which means that we can monitor the quality of the plants.
So do you do all the delivery yourself, or is it drop shipped by?
No, and we do it. So we do it ourselves in the sense that we're organising all the logistics, and we work with a handful of third-party couriers to run vans, which we are scheduling on a kind of daily basis. So when you receive the plants as a customer, they've come directly from our nursery, so we know the quality is going to be brilliant.
Okay, was it your nursery as in a nursery that you work with, or your nursery as in your actual facility?
So we have a facility, a polytunnel. I mean, nursery would be too grand because we're not growing anything from scratch, but we are looking after plants there. We're based alongside a fantastic community nursery and charity called Sunnyside in Hemel Hempstead, which is brilliant because we can tap into their kind of knowledge as well, and bringing in plants from 2 or 3 British nurseries there, looking after them, as I say, for we would aim between 2 and 3 weeks, and then moving them to customers. That gives us the good blend of managing inventory risk. We're not taking that much on, so our turn's pretty quick, but also means that we can make sure the quality is high. To do that well, you've got to have your other processes all brilliantly lined up. So good example is photography and merchandising, because we're moving the range through every time. We've got about 30 different products on the site at the moment, which will soon be 100. Those 30 products are mixes of plants. Once they're gone, they're gone. Yeah. So we've got about probably about a month to pick the plants, bring them in, photograph them, and then sell them.
Okay,
so if you think of it more akin to fast fashion, actually,
yes,
you know, some of the operational challenges. So I think go on.
No, it's something I've always found that in my business we don't have that many things that change a lot, because it is quite a lot of effort to actually, you know, take the photographs, and taking photographs is difficult. Writing descriptions is difficult. It's all, you know, do you have quite a lot of people working on that then? The actual merchandising product.
A lot of me, a lot of me, and no, we got 2 or 3 full-time team members, of which, you know, one of them, Yoel, and I will do most of the photography together at the moment. But each time we do it, we are thinking about, a bit like a pit stop, you know, think about sort of Formula One. How do you kind of knock off 10% of the time that it took from the previous version? Because we know that process is so critical to us, and particularly as we scale. So, you know, and this is something I thought about a lot, and we did pretty well, I think, at Lovespace, is, you know, doing all of the work you can early on, and making sure you've got it to a position that when the demand really comes in, and you can easily, with a startup, as you all know, you know, depending on circumstances, you can be going from, you know, doing, you know, say index of 100 to index of like 2000 within weeks. So your processes have got to be good enough, robust enough to scale to that next level, and you've got to be able to just bring people in, you know, hire people really quickly who can immediately pick up the process, because there's only so much of you.
Yes,
there's only so much of you that can go around. You know, it's fine. You can tempt yourself early on that you can just do it all,
or you just end up run out of energy.
You run out of energy, and you fundamentally can't possibly have the bandwidth to do everything. And when things, you know, when things sort of circle around and you start getting lots of inquiries, you've got a field, or, you know, people who are wanting to change dates of deliveries, or, you know, asking about plants, unless you've got those processes really nailed and the tech that's required to support them sorted early on, you know, that's where a lot of businesses fail.
Okay, that's good advice. So tell me about so I'm thinking about, you know, the plants. They're quite delicate kind of things. How do you go about getting them delivered so they arrive in one piece?
So because we're doing it in sort of same day vans, they're not going on pallets. They're not actually heavily packaged. When it turns up with you, you get the pot. In the pot, we've already put the compost, and we've pre-drilled it and put the appropriate drainage in there. And then the plants are literally just sitting on top of the pot. But there are enough of them, because they can get planted in there. They're secure. And you get that, and you get a sort of a bag of compost. And that is, I don't think, maybe with the exception of, you know, very early on, I don't think we've had any complaints on kind of damage on arrival or similar. That's critical.
Is it ruinously expensive? Because is it ruinously expensive to deliver things like that, or define ruinously expensive?
No, it's not, and it's one of the things that I took from the experience at Lovespace, where we eventually got to a point where delivering with our own vans was cheaper than putting it through a parcel force or a DPD. You know, we're talking about large items. This is not true, obviously, if you were doing postal, or if you were doing small Amazon items. And I know, obviously, with your business, Trevor, you know, a lot of the stuff, if it's small format, then you're probably better just using the kind of big mass networks. But because we're sending stuff out that's, you know, that might weigh 20 kg, 25 kg, some of the larger pots, and they're big formats. They're obviously, you know, plants. To get anywhere near the same quality through a third party, that would be ruinously expensive.
Yeah, I think
to use your words, it is expensive. I mean, you know, we're paying, you know, we're paying above a tenner a drop, and we're only charging customers £5 at the moment for that. But that comes down with density over time, and you know, I'm very confident, having been around that circle before with Lovespace, that's, you know,
£10 doesn't sound too bad.
Just need to scale. Yeah.
Sounds all right. So tell me, you're at the moment, you're only delivering to a certain area. Are you looking to expand that? Where are you delivering to at the moment?
So we deliver to London, most of the southeast. So we go sort of west to Oxford, north to Northampton, east to Cambridge, and south to the coast. And that's pretty much where we, to your point, where we can economically run same day vans from our nursery. We would love to expand, but we're only going to expand once we know we've got the kind of all the metrics sorted for London. once we nailed it, I think, it is interesting. We have so many inquiries from outside our catchment area, which means we're wasting money effectively on some of our marketing. And that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, when we expand, we'll get a lot of effectively free customers compared with now, because we've already got them interested.
Well, I think that brings on to my next question is, how do you market your business?
Usual, I'm afraid, the usual kind of Google and Facebook tax. We do a lot of organic and content work ourselves. Hannah and our team is absolutely brilliant at making sure that we've got relevant content, copy, community stuff up on the obvious platforms, and that definitely works. That's and long term that works. We spend a lot of time thinking about brand as well, and making sure that we're investing in activities that will build brand in the long term. But you can't really escape Google for this kind of thing, and also you can't, if you want to get the message out there, escape. And also exactly. So Google in particular is great because of the lack of wastage, and similarly with Facebook and Insta, we get some wastage there because people want to buy gifts. We're advertising to people in London who want to buy gifts to people outside London, so there's a bit of wastage, but it's but they're good scale platforms. And I think if for us, thinking about our funding journey, we would like to raise more money, and I think it's important to be able to show investors that you've got a scale channel that you can invest more behind to grow the business, rather than we've done 3 or 4 very niche but interesting marketing initiatives. The question then is, well, if I give you more cash, where do how do you
the usual selection of Silicon Valley companies?
Sadly, and it's really disappointing. It's a big problem, I think, for the ecosystem generally. It's clearly we can all argue that having Google, Amazon, Facebook has been fabulous in enabling people, and other tools enabling people to start up quickly and find an audience quickly. There's no doubt about that. But structurally, it's a big problem that all the money inevitably has to go to roughly the same people.
I think also. I think that monopolies do what monopolies do. Eventually, they start to offer a worse service, and
of course they do. Of course they do. Yeah,
I see that particularly from Amazon's point of view, that they are very, very bad to their third-party sellers, and some things, and unless you're one of their customers, then you get a really rough deal. And I think that you do hear. With all of them, basically. Anyway, don't get me started.
No, we can have a completely separate conversation.
Yes,
the regulators are going to be the rock stars, hopefully. And it's nothing against any of the companies, all the people who've started them. As you say, it's just the inevitability. One day we'll be the monopoly in plants. And then I'll welcome the regulators to my door. But
so, how do you, in terms of it, do you get many repeat customers? Is that something you're really, really working towards?
Yeah, and it's been a real surprise, to be honest with you, how strong that's been. So we get about 30% repeat rate within 3 months, and that's off season. And so if you track things like your cohorts and lifetime spend, that's increasing, in a really nice way. That's a mixture of us doing a brilliant job, but also people who get into plants, and certainly kind of potted plants, they really get addicted to it. So, they love it. People who do first orders, and then as soon as the first order lands, they're immediately putting in a second order, which is great. That shows that we're on the right track in terms of the product.
So you're doing that wow thing as people turn up. Obviously, people are
exactly. The next bit is then to get them to tell friends, as much as possible about it, and create moments where that will happen. So we're working on referral at the moment.
So I'm guessing you're not selling much through kind of third-party platforms like eBay and Amazon. That's not
the only one we do. We have done not on the high street, and that was a pretty good experience for Mother's Day. It's early days. We'll see where that goes.
Very gifty.
It is very gifty. So it's fits, and that was to test gifting out. Certainly from a philosophy point of view, I would rather not be captured by a third-party seller. So if we were going to do it, we'd be pretty agnostic. It does make sense to go where customers are looking for you. So we have to think about that over time. But we think that the service we can provide on our platform, because remember, because as you said earlier, we're selling living things. It's not just about sending the product out, it's also about plant care and what goes with what, and ultimately kind of more gardening advice. It makes sense to have Muddy Trowel as a kind of a space in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, third-party platforms, they tend to, if you've got something which is a kind of discrete item which doesn't require customization, fairly standard to deliver, I think they work really well. But I think something like yours, don't know, it's probably trying to put a round peg into a square hole.
It could well be. It could well be. I mean, I think gifting does make sense, and Google delivers good traffic for outdoor plants, but it's it's the opposite actually of what I found with storage with LoveSpace. LoveSpace, there are very few search terms that people go after: storage, storageness, and almonds. Storage for students, and therefore, a long tail strategy doesn't make any sense. You're kind of all competing for the same terms. So ultimately, you really want to get off Google. Whereas with plants, it's a real long tail because you've got all the plant species, you've got both the English names, the Latin names, you've got different environments. So it's a very different kind of strategy. And we're very lucky to be working with, got a really good friend of mine, Rich Gradwell, who's working on that with us.
Because I mean, is it that people are searching for, obviously are people looking for specific plants? They want a specific plant for their house, or do they come to you and have to learn about the plant they want? Or
so it depends what segment we're looking to. So we're going after the third of plant buyers. There's about 2 billion spent on plants in the UK every year, and a third of that is spent by people who really kind of love the idea of having more plants but don't want to do gardening. So they don't know the Latin names, and they might know the names of some of the plants, but they don't really want to. They want something that smells beautiful in the spring, or something's in pinks and whites, or something that's going to fit into a nice shady corner and give them nice green foliage all year round. And so our job is to curate things that do that job for them. It's a craft industry, gardening, and a bit like some of the other craft industries, wine, food, art, it veers towards being a bit snobbish and specialist to the expense of the general consumer. So actually wine has been demystified a bit online, food certainly has, and it's about time gardening did, because it's not, what the offer that's there at the moment is just not fit for purpose, in my view.
Right, yeah. I think if it's interesting. Obviously, it's quite a new business. How has it been funded?
So we funded it through a bunch of sweat equity to begin with. So the early team, we had to get up really quickly, and we had to get up in 2 weeks to meet the problems that were emerging from the first lockdown. So we did that on the basis of, please everyone pile in, do some work. Let's get this up as a team, and everyone will get a little bit of equity as a result. So that's how it started. I then went out, once we knew we were onto something, to some angels who had invested in LoveSpace and some friends and family, and we've raised in a couple of rounds now around 250, between 200 and 250k, which has funded the initial build, branding, marketing, stock, and team, and now we're looking to scale that up. So I'm beginning to have some discussions with venture capital, potentially looking at more angel or crowdfunding to fund it, because it is the kind of business to do, for a number of reasons we've discussed. You got vans on the road, you're going to get density, marketing, there's wastage initially, you're learning how to do plants. It does require a bit of funding up front. It's not a pure trading business. And we think certainly if we can get funding in early, we'll have a bit of a head start.
Is it very much a kind of like an e-commerce business as opposed to a kind of a technology business?
It's definitely not currently a tech centered, it's tech enabled business. So a lot of it is e-com. We're built on WooCommerce at the moment, but there's a bunch of content. The two bits that make it more than that are we're running our own deliveries, and we've got to get all that right, and then plant care tips and equivalent CRM. So making sure people who've bought specific plants get the right tips at the right time. So there's a bit more complexity to it. It's not similar again to LoveSpace, which was is really now a tech business. If you think about it, because with LoveSpace we don't have any vans and we don't have any storage locations, what we're doing is we're matching customers' needs to look after things with warehouses and van networks across the UK, to provide a seamless experience for the end customer, but without us actually having to take hold of anything. We store them with people who can be way better than us, likes of Iron Mountain or other archive storage companies, big resource companies. And so there is, for me, there's that kind of aspiration. I think with this business, it could go down a very tech-driven route ultimately, where once again, we're not necessarily having to touch the plants. We give that to people who've been doing that all their lives, British growers, with capacity, and we match them with customers. We do the curation job and match them with customers who want.
Do you think of becoming more of a kind of more of a platform?
We could do over time. I think it's a good way of scaling. But to do that, what I've learned, if you're going to go down that route, you have to do the doing yourself up front, because you can't build a platform without seeing all the problems and having solved them.
Yeah.
First.
I mean, certainly my experience with things like that as well, getting other people to fulfill orders is that you just depend on how sophisticated they are. Now, I'm going to guess that growers may well not be that sophisticated.
But you have to make it super simple. I mean, that's that's the same with your average, archive, regional archive storer. It's how do you make that process completely clear and also painless, because particularly when you're starting up and you're asking partners to work with you, if you do that, they're so used to doing things their own way, or they've got big clients. You need to make it. You need to win on easiness, as well as it make commercial sense for them. Because if it's remotely difficult, they'll drop you.
Right.
Why would you support a startup you don't know? That may not be there in 2-3 years. You've got to make it so easy for them. I had this. I used to spend a lot of time driving the van at Love Space, and part of that, as well as giving me a bit of headspace away from the business, was to learn, what it really took to do the job at the doorstep, and kind of all of the little cases that would come up that screwed up your average process, which is, when you sat down there, you can draw an average process, but actually it never really worked in person. And, little workarounds that you as a driver would use on your app because it was easier. So, calling a job complete before it is, for instance, because it was easier and there was no, why not? But occasionally that would cause a problem. And I told this story. I said I was at an awards do, because we'd just been kind of one of the fastest growing businesses, I think, in the UK, and we were alongside a bunch of other startup CEOs. And I said, well, I've been in the van today. I'm really trying to get under the skin of what our customers want. And someone to my left said, I just love that story. I love that idea of being in the van. Yeah. I was in the van today, really kind of brainstorming with the team what it takes. And it went around the table like that. And the day after I got on LinkedIn, 2 or 3 things from people I won't name who were there, saying, I've told your kind of metaphor of being in the van to my team. Which I said, no, I was in the effing van. Yeah.
I do, but I agree. I think that you can actually, because I think I found that it's quite easy to give a task to someone. And some people are just really good at doing what you tell them to do. Right, but they just continue doing what you tell them to do, and they never think, how do I improve it? But if you actually do it yourself, you know what things you don't need to do or what things don't work. And I think it's
exactly that.
Really valuable experience. And
doing it yourself and or doing it with someone else because I think everyone in the team wants to do stuff better. They just assume it's really quite dispiriting, even in a small team. They assume that no one wants to make it better for them, or that it's not going to be made better for them. So when I was, working with Piotrek and Dan and others who ran our warehouses, they would just do things the same time, the same way, even if it wasn't working, and they'd find workarounds. And then you'd spend a day with them and go, well, why are you doing like that? I said, well, that's the only way it works. So why haven't you told me? Well, because I just assumed it wouldn't get sorted. And that's what you've got to kill in a small business culture.
Yeah.
I think, is because everyone's got the idea. I mean, people, they might be able to sort of just assume they can continue to do it the same way, but really, everyone wants to make it better.
My example would be, at one point we started off small, and we used to print out all our invoices and we put them in files, and then we got bigger and bigger, until we're just spending like a day a week printing out invoices. And I think I've got this problem with printing out invoices. What do we do about this printing out invoices? And then I sat down with a friend of mine who's actually a professional in archiving and stuff and processing paper. And he goes, well, why don't you just not print them out?
Yeah.
I thought, that's a really good idea. No, why didn't I think that's an excellent idea? So, we just file them on a computer.
There are loads of those things, but that's such a great example of these sort of things that you put great store by when you start up, and then because it's just you and the team, no one ever goes, well, that's stupid. Why are we doing like that?
Why don't we just not do it and then see if anyone notices? Or
exactly right.
So Steve, you've worked for big corporates. So you worked for McKinsey, you worked for, I don't know if you can call the Guardian a big corporate, big enough. And you've also worked for. Can you reflect on working for big corporates and running a startup? What are you? I as someone who's now been working for myself for 12 years, I actually begin to look at big corporates and think, oh, that would be quite nice sometimes. What do you think?
There's definitely that, and when I was sort of the point of doing this last year, I was thinking about going back into corporate life. Either as a CEO or as a director of a much larger company, and that's what I've done, as you said before, at the Guardian. And the Guardian Group was actually a really big corporate, and is a big business, not just the Guardian and the Observer and all the online stuff, but was Auto Trader, EMAP, regional newspapers, radio. It was a big media conglomerate. And part of my job actually there as director of strategy was to make it a smaller conglomerate and focus it much more on the Guardian, and kind of get out of a bunch of media assets that we thought quite correctly we're not going to prove to be that valuable over time. So I thought about going back. What's different? It's less relentless. So I think
working in a big corporate's less relentless.
Being in the corporate, yeah. It's so what you trade off, I think, when you're a startup, you get a lot of control in many ways. You can choose what you do today. You can choose what you sell. You can choose how you talk to people, who you hire. You choose everything, and that's even more so than if you were CEO of a large corporate, because there you've got a bunch of inherited culture and politics and people
and shareholders and
shareholders. I was going to say shareholders. Actually, I think is a bit that comes across pretty much. I think the shareholder thing is quite interesting, but you certainly have more control running your own startup, and I'm sure you felt that, and you have control your path and how quickly you want to grow and all those things. The flip side is it's completely relentless mentally, because it just won't happen unless you make it happen. If you're a corporate, you could. I mean, there are bad CEOs and there are bad directors, and they can sort of last for years and do very little. But that's because there's a huge momentum in the organization already, and there's a bunch of talent around, and they're all ambitious, so they're doing stuff. So I think that there's less places to hide with the startup. It's pretty much immediate judgment from customers. You're always thinking about whether the business can survive or not until you get it to a point where it's on an even keel, which was a fantastic moment when LoveSpace got there. So I think that's a big difference. The connection with customers is a really big difference for me, and what I've absolutely loved from LoveSpace. I think it all got quite abstract, particularly in strategy and particularly for a large group. With loads of readers and measured in them, millions every day online. But who were they? What did they want? Did they really love the Guardian? And were they all the same kind of people? Very difficult to sense your impact. Yeah, exactly. I was a Guardianista, but was everyone getting the same from it as I was? And you have to abstract things. And with a startup, you don't. They're real people, and you make a real difference in their lives, and you can sort of see it. So I think that's a really good thing. It's the same team as well. People have to make a big commitment to come and work with you, or they're desperate. People.
It is possible. It is both, of course.
Both, yeah. I did say that when I got the team starting up this. I said, look, I chose you because you're talented, hardworking, driven, brilliant, and I assume short of other alternative options.
Well, I don't know if you listen to Ivo Graham. He talks about the available. He says there's he refers to himself as the available son.
Yeah, exactly. But that is such a real, that's serendipity, chance, just being there is kind of a lot of what it's about. And so I was going to come back to shareholders and just maybe finish off this point on corporates. The big thing in the corporate is you've kind of got a reputation from your position, and you're trying to defend it the whole time, and you're desperately trying to not look stupid, because the politics of big corporate, as soon as your momentum's gone, or you politically, you lose control, that actually really affects your ability to do your job and your satisfaction in your job. Whereas with a startup, you've got to kind of ignore that and accept that you're going to look stupid from day one. You're doing stuff that no one else has done before. It's very risky. You make those mistakes because that's part of the gig. So you've got to get very comfortable very quickly with that. And actually, if you're the right kind of person, that could be immensely liberating, because you're not looking over your shoulder the whole time. You're not kind of checking whether you've said exactly the right thing to the right person. There's plenty of politics, but it's different kind of politics in a startup organization.
No, it is amazing even how in small companies it can be quite hard to get things done, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, the classic was, I used to try and get the team out to go for drinks, on a Friday evening at Love Space, and quite often I'd be sort of leading the charge at about 5:30, and they'd say, no, we need to stay here. Well, mass revolt from the team, saying, no, we've got to stay and do our jobs. So I was saying, well, who's the boss around here? And you sort of, it's amazing how quickly a culture can build that. You intended to build it, obviously, but then completely supersedes your ability to control it.
Do you know, when I worked in a bank, we used to all go down the pub on a Friday. Everyone, boss is boss. Yeah. 4 pints on a Friday lunchtime. I mean, I just remember that. How did we now? Well, I don't know. Well, certainly I certainly don't do it anymore. But I don't know. Well, Steve, this has been great. But I've got a final question for you. I think, to wrap it up, what has inspired you most recently?
Oh, what a great question. So I've got a friend of mine, a guy called Alec Varma, who's another entrepreneur, and I was very lucky enough, I think, for him to consider me a mentor at one point, but I certainly view him as an inspiration now. And during, again, it's sort of a lockdown story that just preceded this. He set up a charity called Meals for the NHS, which he brought a bunch of people together, really talented folk, some of whom I've worked with before, in a very flat team who were getting food from local restaurants who obviously couldn't send it to anyone at that point, and sent it to hospitals and frontline staff who were working extremely long hours, and have been obviously for 12 months, but were without any of the kind of structures and and ability to get food late night in place. And he started that up in no time at all, and got a lot of very talented people involved, spending a lot of time trying to solve that problem. And that was great inspiration for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was a brilliant thing to do.
Nice thing to do.
Secondly, just the speed with which he was doing stuff and making decisions, and that team was. And it reminded me, and that's what we found when we launched this in 2 weeks, is if you know what you need to do, if you're very clear on the objective and you've got some good people around you, it's just amazing how quickly you can get good stuff done. So yeah, that would be the one.
Okay. Well, Steve, it's been very interesting talking to you, and thank you for your time. And perhaps we can talk again in a few months, and you can give us a status update.
I would love to. As the flowers come in full bloom for the summer, we should do it.
When's your peak period? So summer. Perhaps we can have a sum up and in the autumn. We can find out how you've got on.
Yes, let's do that. That'd be brilliant.
Okay, that'd be great.
Terrific.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks very much.
Bye.